is doomed to failure. And indeed, after all the years of talk about this under the Kyoto Protocol, which was supposed to restore the 1990 level of world emissions by the year 2012, which the last time I looked was only years ago, we are now 40% up worldwide on our carbon emissions in 1990. Because one of the problems is that even if it were economically sensible and practicable to cut carbon emissions, people actually aren't going to do it worldwide, and there's no police force there that can make them. That was one of the things the world government was going to do. Fortunately, the World Government Treaty was trashed even before Copenhagen opened. So that is the democratic point. And now we come briefly to the scientific point. And in all the complicated science, it boils down, as it always must, to one simple question. Answer that question and you answer everything. And the question is this: how much warming will a given increase in CO2 concentration cause? And I'm going to answer that briefly in two ways. First, by taking you to the northern Flinders Ranges of South Australia. And there you will see growing, in one of only two places in the world where it grows, the curly mallee tree. Now, a mallee is a strange type of eucalypt. It's one of the 700 eucalypts. It's one of the rarest species. But where it does occur, it occurs in profusion. And it grows only on one kind of rock, which is dolomitic rock. Dolomitic rock contains 40% CO2. Where did that CO2 come from? It came from the atmosphere, and it went into the oceans. And it formed a bond with the superabundance of calcium ions in the oceans and with some magnesium ions in the oceans to create a complex molecule of calcium, magnesium, and CO2. And that is dolomitic rock. Now, in order for that chemical reaction to occur, we can use Henry's law to work out what is the partial pressure of CO2 in the atmosphere that was necessary to form that rock 750 million years ago in the pre-Cambrian era. Ah, yes, I remember it well. And the answer is, at that time there had to be 300,000 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. About 30% of the atmosphere was CO2. And yet, at the equator and at sea level, and one can see the evidence for this in the northern Flinders Ranges, there was a glacier a mile high. Not once, but twice. It came, and it went, and became tropical again, and it came back. And it did that while there was 300,000 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Today, there are 388 parts per million, not 388,000, 388 parts per million. What do we deduce from that observation? The answer is that at that time, if CO2 had the warming effect that the UN says it has, it would have been completely impossible for glaciers to form or exist at all at the equator at sea level. It simply could not have happened. Now, you may think that's too long ago to compare with today's climate, so let's do a very brief look at today's climate. And we go back to 1850 because that is when the instrumental temperature record worldwide began. From 1860 to 1880, and again from 1910 to 1940, and again from 1975 to 2001, there were three rapid periods of warming. And these periods of warming were exactly parallel slopes on the graph. They were the same rate. There has been no increase in the warming rate in recent times. Now, the first two periods of warming could not have been caused by us, even on the UN's exaggerated estimate of the effect of CO2 on temperature. It couldn't be. The third period, which could in theory have been, actually wasn't. Because for a moment we're going to depart from the Xbox 360s of the Ziti teenagers that the UN uses to construct its computer models of the climate. And instead, we're going to look at the real world of measurement. And why does measurement trump models? Well, suppose I were to take off my tie and ask you how long it was. You could ring round all the tie manufacturers, find out how many ties they sell, what their average length was, and then you could set up a model to try and calculate your best estimate of how long my tie was. Or you could take a tape measure and simply measure it. And that is why measurement trumps models. And here is the measurement that's been done by a number of different scientists. It shows that between 1983, which is when the satellites were first able to observe the phenomena I'm describing, until 2001, exactly coincident with that rapid period of warming, there was a naturally occurring reduction in cloud cover worldwide. These things come and go. And that naturally occurring reduction in cloud cover caused a warming that is rather more than the warming that was actually observed during the period. Now what that suggests is that the influence of CO2 and all other greenhouse gases must have been negligible. Now I can give you dozens of further examples from the peer-reviewed literature by a variety of different methods, all of them based not on modelling but on measurement, which demonstrate that the effect of CO2 on temperature must be small. Therefore, there is no climate problem. But if there were, then the correct approach to that problem is to adapt in a focused way, and certainly not to continue with the Christmas game that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has come to be. And given that science has failed us, we've seen repeated failures by the UN's climate panel to do the most elementary checking before publishing what turned out to be complete rubbish. Almost every day a news story comes out, but the one that sticks in my mind is where they said that all the Himalayan glaciers would be gone by 2035, just 25 years from now. And the lead author of the chapter in question has admitted that he had no basis for that figure. He knew it was incorrect, and he included it because, as he said, I wanted to exert political influence on governments to make them do what I want. A naked admission that the IPCC's process is no longer scientific, if it ever was. Instead, it is a political process. So our policy then is that first and foremost we would establish a royal commission to, under a tough-minded High Court judge with advocates professionally arguing the case on both sides and cross-examining both sides, so as to form a view on whether or not we should any longer place any trust whatsoever in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And in the meantime, it is UKIP's policy that we will cease to fund that panel. We will cease to fund any initiatives to do with global warming, including the European Carbon Trading Scheme, in which we will cease to participate. And those are the key elements of the policy which you have in the document in front of you.